Steph, first things first, you're standing at the spot yesterday where this all began, just outside the CFMEU offices. There was a line of police right where you are and the protesters a couple of 100 metres away. At that point, I think there were only 200 odd of them. Is there any sign at the moment that there is any activity there this morning, or there's likely to be, or any indications that there will be, in fact, be another protest today?
Well, we heard from the Victoria Police Chief Commissioner Shane Patton that they've received intelligence suggesting that protesters will return here and police will be here ready and waiting. As you can see behind me, this is the headquarters of the CFMEU. It's boarded up because the windows were smashed there just a couple of days ago. At the moment, we have no protesters there on the street corner where they started to gather. But if we just take a quick trip around this way, you can see that just on the other side of the road, just in probably about 10 or so minutes ago, we saw two big police public order response trucks turn up, along with about 3 or 4 vehicles as well here. So they're obviously waiting at this stage to see whether or not there is going to be any protest action that starts up now. Yesterday it was around about 9:30 or so that we saw some people starting to turn up, and these lines happen, as you mentioned. So we just don't know yet what the situation is going to be, but we do know that Shane Patton was talking about using different tactics today. Now, as you mentioned just a short time ago, we heard, and that's an ambulance, obviously nothing to do with this protest, but clearly this is on the way to one of our main hospitals here, the Royal Melbourne Hospital.
And Steph,
I'll just point out what they're arguing about.
Yeah, Steph, I'll just point out that we're showing some shots yesterday of the protests and the police line at State Parliament. So just talk us through what happened with the protests yesterday.
Yeah, so they started here at the CFMEU headquarters, and then after they were moved back a bit by those riot police, they then kept moving along and they headed east towards the State Parliament, basically, and tried to get in there, said, join us to people. There was obviously a huge row of the riot police that were gathered there as well, with police on horseback, and then they wound their way through the city streets and ended up going up onto the Westgate and bringing the Westgate Bridge and the freeway to a standstill, with all these people that were in their cars, just really scared, basically, because cars were being damaged. These protesters were threatening people as they were stuck in their cars on the Westgate Bridge, and then they had almost a bit of a party up the top of it, singing some songs, and then came back down here again before coming back, and some of them were arrested here late yesterday afternoon. So there were about 62 arrests, but the Premier, Daniel Andrews, has just a little while ago come up and basically really condemned this behaviour. He says that it wasn't just construction workers. These were clearly infiltrated by other groups, anti-lockdown, anti-vaccination groups as well. And he says that they were really acting in an ugly, unlawful and completely threatening way. And he says that it just wasn't what any of the Victorians wanted to see, as we are still stuck in this lockdown. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
What we saw yesterday is an insult to the vast, vast majority of tradies or people in the building industry who are not about wrecking, they're about building. Yesterday we saw 1,000, 2,000 people, many of whom behaved appallingly. They do not reflect, and they should not be seen to reflect, an entire industry. That would be unfair. That would be wrong. The number that is in some ways more important is that almost 90,000 people yesterday across our state went and got vaccinated. They know, as I know, that the way out of this is not violence, it's vaccination.
Now, he says that this sort of behaviour, this protest action, puts everything that we're doing at the moment to try to get out of this lockdown at risk. And he also says that there is the possibility that we could see, once these protests finish up, them actually look at the construction industry and potentially do a reset as well, maybe allowing some of those areas where they've got fully vaccinated workers to return before that 2-week ban is up. But we also heard from the Chief Commissioner of Police, as I mentioned, Shane Patton, and he said we're not going to see a repeat of the cat and mouse sort of tactics that we saw yesterday. He also said that there'd be well in excess of 500 officers here today to make sure that we did not see any sort of similar repeats as well. And he also put a message out to anybody that was contemplating to come and protest again to stay at home. Let's have a listen to what he said about changing the tactics today.
Victoria Police have planned. We have significant tactics in place. We will be agile in our response. We will be very swift in our response. And conduct, as we've seen yesterday and the previous day, will not be tolerated. I'm not going to step through the amount of police that we're going to have on deck today. I'm not going to talk about what our tactics are. Save to say that those tactics will be different and we have significant police numbers.
And so, Steph, the Police Commissioner at that media conference also said that there were, in fact, construction workers as part of that protest yesterday, but there were other groups as well. Some people who'd been told to dress to look like tradies. Just take us through what's been said about who was actually involved in this and what are the different causes these people are pursuing.
Yeah, so that was definitely pointed out, and in fact the Premier also said that these clearly weren't all construction workers, that we are seeing elements of the anti-lockdown crowd. There were a few very familiar faces that we could see in the crowd from particularly social media that were very big in part of the anti-lockdown movement, in terms of the anti-vaccination movement, and also, according to John Setka, the Secretary of the CFMEU, who himself was pelted with milk crates and also bottles here at the CFMEU just 2 days ago. He says that there were a lot of far-right extremist groups that had also infiltrated it. Now, he said that clearly we are also seeing some construction workers, and he did concede that there were some that were among the crowd, but he did say that they would be trawling through their own Facebook video footage of all of this as well. And if they spot anybody who is actually a tradie, his message to them is you may as well go off and pick fruit in Mildura, because you certainly won't be welcome on a construction site anytime soon. But this is just a little about what he had to say just on News Breakfast a little while earlier.
We're shut now because of these morons. We've got 300,000 people sitting at home that should have been working otherwise. So it's a bit of a sad moment. We have tried, we have worked hard with governments, with the health department, with employer organisations, kept our industry going since April last year, unlike other people who have lost everything and have not worked since April last year. We have worked, we've tried everything.
And so that was John Setka, the Secretary of the CFMEU, who himself faced the angry horde just 2 days ago as a result of this construction shutdown that we've experienced here now, and we're going to see for 2 weeks in all metropolitan Melbourne, as well as the lockdown areas of regional Victoria in Ballarat and Geelong, in the Surf Coast Shire, and also up in the Mitchell Shire as well. But yesterday, just once again, those really ugly scenes that we saw here, that many Melburnians were just left scratching their heads, not really believing that we could see these sorts of scenes in our CBD. And we saw 62 arrests. The police say that most of those will be charged with breaching the Chief Health Officer's directions, so they'll all be slapped with a fine of about $5,500 plus the couple of $100 fine for not wearing your mask. There were a few of those who will also be charged with assaulting police and also damaging police vehicles, because we saw that as well. And there were 3 police officers that were injured during the melee yesterday. Now, luckily, they were all minor injuries, but we also saw even journalists being attacked. So at this stage, we can't see any protesters, but we can see now the police line. They are just moving in as we speak. So there are the first contingent of police officers that have just got out of those trucks, and they are starting to get together and have their formation ready in preparation for any of these protesters that we see. So you can see that these aren't the riot squad officers at the moment, but they are obviously the first lot that we can see coming out. And there is another congregation, if we just swing the camera back, you can just see that there's another bit of a congregation at the moment over at the trucks at the public order response, and here comes some more down from the end of the street. So obviously they're now all moving into position, Joe.
Yeah, but Steph, absolutely no sign of any protesters at this stage.
No, we can't see any protesters. Yesterday they were all on the opposite corner, which is the Markets corner here, just at the very outer edge of the northern edge of the CBD, or the main business block. And they're now all moving further down. So I'm not quite sure whether or not they've got any intelligence to suggest that the protesters might be congregating or trying to congregate just around the corner here from the CFMEU, so just around the corner in Victoria Street, which is where they seem to be going at the moment.
And Steph, the Premier was saying in that media conference just now, the positive thing from his perspective yesterday was the number of construction workers actually turning up to get vaccinated instead of being involved in protests. What's happening with the COVID numbers today? Usually by about this time, the Victorian Department of Health has tweeted out what the numbers are. Yesterday it was the highest number in this outbreak, above 600 for the first time, and one more death, taking that death toll to 13. Have those COVID figures come through for Victoria this morning yet?
I'm just checking the Twitter account of the Health Department at the moment. They haven't come in yet at this stage, but you're right, we normally do see them come around at the moment. The Premier, when he had that brief press conference at Victoria Police Centre with the Chief Commissioner, he did say that they would be having another press conference just to go through the details and the figures. So due to the fact that there are these likely protests that will be eventuating, maybe they will delay that press conference a little, but as you mentioned, 603 new cases yesterday, so that is the highest number that we have seen so far this outbreak, and in well over a year. Sadly, there was a woman aged in her 70s from the Hume area, which is just in Melbourne's north, who became our 13th victim of this outbreak, and we've seen the numbers also increase in terms of hospitalisations, although what we are also seeing is all but 3 of those people in hospital, of about, I think it was 241 people in hospital, there were only 3 that were fully vaccinated. So that's really what the Chief Health Officer, Professor Brett Sutton, was saying. Please go and get vaccinated as a matter of urgency, and do it as if your life depends on it, because after all, it does in this outbreak. And you never know, he was talking to his colleagues that are in the ICU departments, and many of their patients had said to them, look, I'm not vaccinated, and it wasn't because they were anti-vax or any reason, for the fact that they just hadn't got around to it yet. So the call is really on to go and get that vaccine that is available to you right now. So we have seen a big uptake in the areas of Hume, which is one of the main areas that's affected in Melbourne's north, and I think that there were probably around 85% or so of those new cases yesterday that were focused in the north and the western suburbs too. So we're just waiting. Just while I've been talking, we still have no details, but as you can see, we've now got a second group of police that have just congregated just on the other side. So they're obviously forming an area around the CFMEU headquarters, just in case we do see any protest action happening again today.
Okay, Steph Ferrier reporting there from the streets of Melbourne, and a nod to your camera operator for keeping us across what was happening around you there. And yeah, stay safe on the streets of Melbourne today, because there were some really ugly scenes there, one in particular involving a journalist. Okay, Steph Ferrier there in Melbourne.